I'm truly fortunate to be able to be here. I come to Rhode Island so often now that I see familiar faces. I'm like, oh, I know you, I know your name, but I've seen you many times. My name is Sean Roy. I'm with an organization called TransCen. I have worked with the Rhode Island team for many years. The accent here is Minnesota. And really just so fortunate to be able to be at an event with so many people that are passionate about transition. I know that Andrew acknowledged the RTCs for the work that they put in to organize this event. So let's give them a hand. This is a lot of work, and there's a lot of thought, and there's a lot of partnership. So not only the hand for the RTCs, but all of the facilitators that they bring in, all of the resources that are sitting over here. This is just a neat thing to be able to be a part of. It's also a special treat for me to be able to be speaking with Ryan today. I had a chance to connect with Ryan. I didn't know Ryan before this, but Meg connected us and said, hey, we'd like you to help out with this session. We've had an opportunity to talk a couple of times. And I really think, honestly, you're going to have a lot of takeaways today from his insights and his experiences around engaging students. So as you listen to Ryan, I want you to contemplate one key question, which is, what is student engagement? What does it mean to you? What do you want to see happen? What does it mean to your teams? And I would encourage you not to fall into the trap of thinking that engagement equals compliance. Engagement is not trying to get somebody to do what you want them to do. Engagement is truly helping somebody feel an ownership and a passion over what it is that's happening to them. So I think that is going to come across loud and clear. Ultimately, this is a crucial conversation, I think, for three main reasons. It's because it's good for students, it's good for educators, and it's good for all of us. Here's what I mean by that. Number one, and this is according to some studies that were done, Dr. Jim Martin at the Zero Center. Students who actively participate in the IEP process are more likely to be employed or enrolled in post-secondary education after high school. So student engagement is a method to be able to help students have better post-school outcomes. Related to that, schools who more actively involve students in the IEP process tend to do better on the transition indicators. Indicator 13 and 14, that is what the research showed. So it's a way to help you as school and education teams be able to reach some of the benchmarks that you are wanting to reach. But it's good for all of us. So I'm an old guy. Feel that way sometimes anyway. And in my world, though, in the world of advocacy and training, I still am often the youngest person in the room. We need voices of experience, lived experience, young people who are ready to take the baton and be able to advocate for the things that we want to see happen. And young people like Ryan are exactly who we need right now. So I'm really excited for you to hear from him, and probably now a little less from me. So, Ryan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this is kind of a talk show interview kind of thing going on. Our chairs are slightly slanted together. We've got a set of questions that we would like to ask Ryan. Ryan's going to give us his responses. After the questions, we're going to give you the opportunity to be able to ask questions of yourself, of Ryan, or to share maybe some strategies of things that have worked for you in terms of engaging students. So Ryan, for those of you that have not had the opportunity, individuals in the audience, to be able to hear you speak, this is your opportunity to introduce yourself. Let us know about Ryan.
You know, Sean, I'm glad you talked about the studies because I didn't bring any studies. So, but good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. And I am so honored that I was asked by Meg and the team to do this. So thank you for listening to me, and I hope that what I have to say is beneficial to you and your situations. My name is Ryan Lukowicz, and I am a rising junior at Roger Williams University studying political science, and I'm on a pre-law track with a psychology minor as well. And so I am also totally blind. I have coloboma of the optic nerve, and then when I was 12, I lost the little vision that I had to a retinal detachment. So that was quite a transition. I had a few surgeries, but have now adjusted to being totally blind with no functional vision. And through that experience, I learned a lot and was excited to participate in my IEP process, which I will talk more about today, thanks to the dedicated and amazing team throughout the North Kingstown School Department, of which many are in the crowd. I've had many experiences. I won't turn this into my resume, but I used to host a podcast in high school where I interviewed political candidates, which actually started as a weather podcast. And it's really interesting that to give some context to that clip, that happened, that interview took place around my freshman or sophomore year in high school. Turns out math and science classes not as fun as I thought they were going to be. So, and I really got into politics from that experience working with the Sherlock Center, learning how I can advocate on a systems level and improve our government, right? So that decisions don't get made that hurt students, such as what was going to happen with the Perkins School for the Blind transition and sending all of these out-of-state people into Rhode Island. It's just not good for education. So luckily now we have a permanent line item in the budget for blind students, thanks to the advocacy of so many people, but it really taught me so many experiences and led to me getting a job at the State House, taking notes as a legislative page. I've also been a camp counselor for the Ocean State Center for Independent Living's Quest for Independence camp, and I passed a bill my senior year of high school about adaptive physical education classes for my state representative at the State House as part of my senior project. So happy to talk today, and feel free to, of course, talk to me throughout the day when there's time as well, if we don't have time to get to everybody's questions. But I'm really excited about this.
You can be around all day?
Yes.
For the most part?
Mm-hmm.
Like through lunch at least?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh, of course, I can't miss lunch. I don't know what they're going to serve.
Yeah. A college kid at free lunch, he's not letting that go. Yeah, this may not be your resume or job interview, but I hope everybody is listening and maybe has the opportunity to introduce yourself, because you'll be working for him in about 15
Oh, stop.
the way that he's going. So the topic today, of course, Ryan, is student engagement. So from your perspective, right, a youth perspective, somebody that's been through transition, what does it mean for a student to be engaged in their education and transition? And then after that, if you could also speak to, like, what's the opposite side? Like, what doesn't it mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it has to start, I think a start is showing up, right? And making sure that the students are truly involved by going to the IEP meetings, but I think it's so much more than that, right? On like a day-to-day level, making sure that you're checking in with students, introducing yourself, making your role clear as educators. Maybe it's definitely, all of you know that you have titles, but it goes beyond that, right? Like, what do you actually do? How are you helping the student, right? And sort of just making sure that is explained, and making sure that students and families are, at the meetings. And I realize, I think some of it is just about like going back to the basics, but I know that as educators, you sort of have this like legal obligation in a way to, serve the families and caregivers, because, students may be under 18, and I think it's really thinking about going beyond, sort of the legal stuff and really focusing on just like what should be done morally. So I think student engagement looks like making sure every student has a basic understanding of what their disability looks like. And I'll talk about this later, but I'm one of the people who really is an advocate for using the word disability, right? Like special needs, okay, we all have special needs, right? Or like differently abled is another one. And I understand that everyone has their personal preferences. But I just think that there's a stigma around the word, and we need to change that culture. But I think, student involvement, it's a phrase that probably gets thrown around as very subjective, but I was really, I've been going to my IEP meetings since I think late elementary school, and it also really helped that my parents were both teachers. They were very determined people. I was going to camp when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I wouldn't even sleep with a roommate. I slept in the same room as the camp director when I was 6. Right, but that's how I got my foot in the door, so to speak. So it helped a lot that I had role models and other people around me. And I think what student engagement doesn't look like is anything that is really prescribed or sort of this, I don't want to say scripted in nature, but just maybe you sort of know. I think engagement is great in any form, but if it feels forced or if it feels like you're just doing it because you have to do it, maybe it's about changing sort of how you engage the student, right? If they're not engaged, and I know that can be very difficult from person to person in terms of sort of what their disability and profile looks like. But I think it's the reason I became an advocate for so many people is because of how I saw others around me in school advocating for my needs, right? Like I remember I was in elementary school and I'm sitting there and it was back when the iPad 3 was a thing, and they were talking about, oh my God, there's this new thing called Siri, right? You can talk to Siri. And I was like 8 years old and I'm just sitting there like, this is great, like other people are helping me, right? But emphasizing in transition that you are your own biggest advocate, especially when you don't have champions like you all in schools advocating for you. So sort of getting ready for that process into the next step, and really taking this sense of like self-accountability and self-awareness to say, what do I need, right? And I'm the only one who truly knows myself and understands my needs on a day-to-day basis.
So iPad 3, is that old?
Yeah.
Okay, what are we on now?
I don't even know if they number them anymore. I think it's like the Air and the Pro, and I don't know.
All right, I can't keep up.
Well, the first iPad didn't even have a camera app on it. I think it just had the Photos app, and I remember like not understanding that. But it's just funny how time flies. Technology has evolved, and I think it's really helped our students. I think that's a big theme of the day.
Well, and I think we could go down a whole rabbit hole about using technology to engage students, but I think you make a really interesting point, Ryan, about going back to the basics. And I love what you said at the very beginning of your comment there, which is helping students understand what an IEP is, right? What is an IEP, and why do they need an IEP, and who are the people on their team, and what is the purpose of this? So I think engagement is information. But when we were talking a little bit earlier, not sure what that is. Is the train coming by? That's the 8:30 to Boston. When we were talking in our prep call, you also talked a little bit about this idea of ownership. Do you have any ideas for the educators in the room about how to help students feel ownership over their transition points?
Yeah, I have a few. I think it really starts with having them help form the goals if possible. Of course, everything is sort of age and disability appropriate, but I think that, like, especially when goals are changing on a year-to-year basis, right? Like, what feels reasonable to the student that they can achieve in a year? And it's such a good practice for goal setting too. I mean, I've been in workshops before they talk about SMART goals, right? I'm sure you all sort of go through the same process of thinking about what is really measurable, attainable, and realistic, and all those words, within a year's time, right? Or however long time is of an IEP. So my specialists always sat down with me. I had a teacher of students with visual impairments and an orientation and mobility specialist. I had OT for a little bit, and they sat down with me. And sometimes they were just like, "Hey, what do you think your goal should be?" Right? Usually they gave me like at least sort of a template, or they may have to come up with their goals. a couple of examples of where I sort of gave my feedback was, I suggested that in the IEP it said for mobility services, like instead of a certain number of hours per week, do hours per month, and then we can do longer community-based lessons. And that's another important theme, as I had the pleasure of doing things like making a Thanksgiving dinner in high school that took half a day, and being able to balance academics and services really well to make sure I was still getting those core classes and sort of more electives as I went along in high school. But the other thing was, I was like, well, I have a good enough specialist where we can sort of work out how we want to use the time, right? It doesn't need to be every Monday at X time. And we sort of were flexible and could use after school time as well. So that's one example that comes to mind. And there are some other ones, it's very standard for blind students to have Braille goals in their IEP. And I was somebody who felt like more of an auditory person, so I advocated for myself in that way to say, can we focus more on assistive technology and audiobooks and such instead of maybe more Braille-based content. So I think that's how you get a student to truly take ownership. Like if they support the goals, then that's your blueprint, right? It's not like you're talking about the IEP to your students every day and just focusing on that, but that's like the foundation almost, and you can't have everything else without that, and sort of just understanding that process, right? Like, and again, not every student may want to or need to know like why an IEP is important and sort of is there in the first place, but some do, and but I think a lot of like students in transition really need to know, regardless of what their situation is.
I think that's a very intuitive point. Students will feel ownership if they feel like their input is valued and incorporated into what it is that's happening. That's really good. You had, when we were talking earlier, you had really wanted to talk about this idea of messaging, of elevating expectations. So what are some strategies that educators can use to be able to elevate expectations and send positive messages to students about disability?
Yeah, well, there are so many. I'll focus on two that are almost contrary to each other, but I think they relate so much. First is making sure that various disabled people get to interact with each other throughout the day, and finding like different activities for them to do together, right? Realizing that you're not isolated, you're not the only one. You want to talk about studies. I know studies show that we have a loneliness epidemic in this country, and I think there are so many students who may go home and just, we don't know what they're doing, right? Or they're trying to fill their time in the summer. There's just not a lot for them to do. So I think encouraging those social opportunities and connecting parents together or doing what you can within the school day is huge. Even if it's not always academic related, right? Just like taking a break. I'm a student senator in college, and I ran council this year. Every week we took 10 minutes and we did an icebreaker, right? And everyone was like, why are we doing these icebreakers? And I was like, well, I want to truly get to know all of you, right? Like, let's ask a question. Let's, bring in a bag of candy, right? And everyone takes out their favorite kind of candy, and, if they get Hershey's, answer what pet you have, and so on and so forth. So I think there's so many creative little activities that we can build in throughout the day to sort of check in with our good students, and see how they are doing outside of school, and making sure that if they find a commonality or something that they want to talk about more, it's probably more meaningful for them to talk about their favorite movie for 5 minutes than figuring out X equals 7, right? It's just the reality. And that will help them more in their transition to learn about communication and critical thinking skills. The second piece is also getting those students, especially those in maybe alternative programs and so on, into the mainstream, and making sure that they have trying to advocate in your schools, right? Having like at least 1 or 2 periods a day. I know this is hopefully already happening, but like for me, I was in a lot of a couple of honors and AP classes, and I also went into adaptive physical education, and you had all kinds of students in there, And that benefits, sort of the able-bodied peers because they are focusing and some of them are really interested in students with disabilities, and they may major in college in psychology or educational studies. There's so many different paths there where those small interactions with students really help, and it also helps those who have disabilities, become more mobile, right? Interact with new people, make more connections in different physical spaces throughout the building where they're also it helped me so much because in APE there was so much more interaction, and we were learning by practicing, and it was not about being competitive or anything. So I am so appreciative for that service. And even though I was in classes with different folks, it was just a great time to socialize, and something I always look forward to. Just to sort of make each day go by fast and sort of break up the day. So those I think are two big ones.
I like the idea of creating community amongst the students, yet also then creating connections in the larger environment. That makes a lot of sense. So obviously, you are an amazing self-advocate, right? Can you speak a little bit about some of your experiences or how you gained these self-advocacy skills and why you think it's important for students with all types of disabilities to be able to be given that opportunity? And then love for you to talk a little bit, because you mentioned your parents were teachers as well. My mom was a teacher as well. What's the role the family played in helping you build those self-advocacy skills?
Yeah, so I'll start from the beginning. When I was little, I had a big, very involved family, right? Like I have parents who both have three or four siblings each, and they were just a big part of my upbringing. My aunt babysat me for years, and so because I never really went to daycare, I was a little bit behind socially, right? So that was a little bit of a struggle early on, but I think as I got older and as others matured and sort of, I understood more about myself and they understood more about the world, that became an easier thing. But I'll start with the advocacy piece, which is that I think if you find the things that matter to each student and think about how either events in the world or in their school or whatever it is, right, that impacts them and maybe their disability, how to get them involved. Like, I remember there was a student who went to my high school and he really struggled to wear a mask during COVID, and they would always have to tell him to put his mask on. I sort of always thought to myself, well, it would be a really good learning opportunity for him to maybe advocate for himself, right? Email maybe the principal or the superintendent and say, hey, why is this a policy, right? Now, of course, the mask policy wasn't going to change, but at least he could understand, right, and advocate for himself. That's one example. I think that for me, I knew that when the vision services were going to be cut my freshman year, that it was going to be devastating for myself and so many people to start with these new service providers who had no clue how I walked. I mean, IEP goals are great in writing, but I think that being able to talk through them and actually understand them in conversation is always preferred, right? But there are just so many niche things, right? Having someone come in and being, introduced to he needs the quadratic formula and Braille and blah, 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 is it can be intimidating. I understand that. So I think all of us advocate every day, we all know that, right? You might advocate for yourself when you ask where the bathroom is in this building today. And so I think phrasing it as more like something that these students already do and formalizing it as a concept. Yes, it's a vocabulary word, advocate, that they may not have heard of, but maybe what are some related things to that, and how do we make it so that the students are truly doing it without even thinking about it is the best case scenario for themselves, and then how do we use it to help others, right, through other soft skills like communication, cooperation, and so on is best. So my parents were very good advocates for me. In kindergarten, I was with an aide who apparently never showed up, although I don't remember that. So that was a thing. right, that they had to overcome, and it definitely got easier as I went along. One of the big struggles I did have in high school was around math classes, particularly geometry and algebra 2. Right? I sort of feel like, why did I take those, right? But I had to for the graduation requirements. So I'm happy to talk more about that if people are interested. But that was just, trying to feel an angle was tough. And then the other story was, of course, my vision loss in middle school, which, I think my parents actually reacted to it worse than I did, right? Like looking back, it was really tough for them to take time out of school, go back and forth to Boston, be involved in surgeries. And I'm just like, okay, what's next? So I'm not emotionally super deep, I guess. But that sort of helps me in my advocacy because I stay very grounded, very kind, very firm, and just realizing that everything is a balance between sort of getting what you want, but realizing that you have to go about it in a certain way and that there are structures and systems in place to make that happen.
Yeah, making self-advocacy natural. I think that is an interesting insight. And maybe starting earlier, right? I sometimes think with transition age students in particular, we're like, oh, well, you're 17 right now, you're gonna lead your IEP, and we don't give them any skills or any practice, we don't talk about it through elementary school or middle school, so I think that's interesting.
Yeah. Well,
and I can see how your family would react, maybe, like, and you're just kind of going with the flow, and I can see how your family would be,
Yeah, I mean, I got diagnosed at 6 weeks old. I mean, I don't know what my parents thought I was going to turn into, but here I am, right? Politics didn't run in the family, right? I guess I didn't get the dominant gene, although some say I should become an educator. And if I could, I think another point to raise is that what helped me was I was always thinking about transition. I mean, I had specialists in middle school being like, hey, we're not going to be here in college. You better start learning how to write an email. And I was like, well, that's sort of a silly comparison or maybe an exaggeration to make. But it helped me always think about that end goal. And I think we think of transition as such a binary thing, right? Like, oh, when you turn 14, X will happen. Of course, we want there to be standards and models, but it's so much like, you're in transition or you're not, or you're doing this or you're not. And I think we have to give people a room to grow and understand that everything is a spectrum.
I think you are an educator. That's exactly what you're doing right now. Your education comes in a lot of different forms. Did you ever experience a situation where your transition goals or what you wanted was different from what your family wanted? And because what we're trying to get at is, do you have any insights for the folks to what to do when that happens, when a student goal maybe differs from a family expectation?
Yeah, well, I think starting with the later part of your question, I think making sure that each stakeholder in the IEP process is consulted, and I know it takes time, right? The whole bringing a student, right? But take time out of the day and sort of doing it separately from the family, I think is a really helpful thing because you can sort of acknowledge those disagreements and think about how do you help bring everybody together. Not to say that you all are mediators or went to law school and know how to do that professionally, but sometimes people just have different perspectives or disagreements. I think it's also really important to be honest with students and families, right? Like, if you are a case manager and another teacher on your team feels a different way than you do, present both perspectives. I think we present this picture of every single teacher feels exactly the same about everything and all adults are unified in this homogenous group. That's just not reality, right? We're all human. We all have different thoughts. And I think it can be tough when in high school, I had certain requirements for when teachers were supposed to get me materials. And when that didn't happen, it was very frustrating, right? And I think the school did as good of a job as they could have of basically saying hey, this is unacceptable, but we can't. There's nothing we can do except for try to meet with them and meet with their department head and get everybody on the same page. But there's some bad apples out there, of course. So I think trying to bridge that and make sure that everyone is making maybe the meeting more of a formality than an actual full-on discussion or debate, because everyone already knows the goals. Everyone already knows what's going to be reviewed at the meeting. And I know there can be check-in meetings in between, right? So trying to separate out sort of those different phases and different elements. And then to the first part of your question, one disagreement that my family and I did have was my parents felt really passionately in high school and middle school that I should take the RICAS test. And I, of course, didn't want to take it, but I had good reason, because I truly didn't know what accommodations I would need because my vision was such in flux after my surgeries. So that was something where I guess I did speak up and basically say, like, hey, this is not going to work. And I think I was supposed to take it in 8th grade and COVID happened. So that story sort of got cut off in terms of how that would have worked. But I did take the PSAT and SAT. And the real interesting thing about that was all of the educators in my school were very quick to be honest and, let's see, how do I word this? Called out College Board for some of the problems with my materials. I did end up taking tests as well as my AP test and doing fine, and again had the support of everyone on my IEP team to do that. So that was really great. And thank goodness that happened and it led to college and so on. But yeah, there are little things. My mother didn't understand why I had to take geometry. And I was like, well, if I don't take geometry, I don't graduate, right? Like, that's just how it is. There's very little wiggle room, I think, especially with the new Rhode standards, which many of you are more educated about than I am. So there were a lot of times, I just sort of worked hard on a day-to-day basis and didn't give up, and spent a lot of time trying to get on my education, and there you go.
So I'm just going to do a quick time check, because I'm looking at a clock on the wall, but I want to make sure it's actually the right time. So that's why, oh, okay, perfect. It's a little fast. Okay. No, that's fast, this is right. All right, so we're doing great. I think too for that, I like that, the mediation and being honest, two sides of this argument. I think it also relates to expectations as well. So as Ryan and I were talking to be able to prepare for this, he was very complimentary to his high school team. And so the last question before we get to any questions that you guys may have for Ryan or any observations is, in what ways did your high school experience prepare you to be able to work towards your post-school goals? So I know that you're in college, so you haven't reached your post-school goals yet, but what are either maybe a couple of things that were super helpful to you, and if there's anything that you wish maybe would have been different?
I think what was super helpful was everyone acknowledging that we don't have all the answers about transition, and particularly how it relates to you and your future. So shout out to Miss Maserlian, who I know is not here, but she was the one who passed along a lot of the information about go to the West Bay Collaborative College panels, right? And that's how I got connected with this agency. And that was a great start, because again, I learned from people who were sort of already in college doing the work. So having more events, panels, whatever it looks like within schools and beyond. I think West Bay Collaborative is willing to have college panels at all of your schools if you want them. Just saying. And then also, I think my high school did a really good job of walking me through what the different steps would be after college, and the in-school team sort of relying on my specialists to guide that process of okay, what accommodations do I have now, and what can I have in college? A big part of it was making sure that all of my stuff was access-based, so that I wouldn't get used to a reduced number of questions, although it would be easier, or different things like that, and making sure that I was still truly held to the same expectation as everyone else was. Which I think we have to think about what is the reasoning behind maybe fewer multiple choice questions for a student or something like that, especially if they are college bound, because that won't be an accommodation that is accepted at college. through disability service offices. I also met with a lot of disability service offices in high school as I was making my decision. I applied to 8 schools, and there were a couple schools through those meetings where, all the people were great, but when you start asking questions about the physical campus and trying to get around, which is probably my biggest struggle in college, is like the mobility piece still, you learn a lot, and you have specialists and teachers with you to sort of ask those questions and make sure the conversation goes well. If they are doing that 1 or 2 times, then again, it gives you that blueprint, it gives you that foundation. So that was really helpful. And then just ongoing communication is another big thing. Checking in, again, informally, email, in person, however that looks best to the student. And then also being able to have the student share more about their disability or their experience to different stakeholders in school and beyond. It's good practice to public speak, but not everybody has to maybe do it in that way. Maybe it's writing an essay or doing some sort of art project. I was talking to a student in my job yesterday who is doing this project where they have to show their identity through a sculpture. And so that question came up from me asking them about, sort of the end of the year, and it led to a really good conversation about how they feel misunderstood and, how they were displaying themselves in art. And I was like, damn, that's sick. Not something I would be able to do. But point being is that this looks different to every student, and we really have to go back to the basics, but showing each student knows a lot about themselves. We all love to talk about ourselves, and just being able to share that was something I had the opportunity to do, like in my 8th grade science class, and just in front of different groups. And this is why I love doing things like this, because it promotes connection. It brings us all together, and we all have this shared common goal of being able to provide the best education we can to all students, regardless of ability or disability. So that is something that was really helpful, was being able to explain and educate my peers and others about my experience. So, yeah.
So we have time for a couple of questions before we gotta get you off to your breakouts. The RTCs are gonna grab some microphones here. And again, either a question that you might have for Ryan or anything that you would like to share in particular about ways that you engage students that you think are particularly helpful that you'd like to share with the rest of the group. Does anybody have a question or a strategy that they would like to share with everybody? Okay, I figured this.
I just don't believe that there's not one question in this crowd.
I mean, I'll talk more, but
We got someone. One second.
it's just like in school, once one person asks a question, more people are gonna ask questions.
Good morning.
Hello.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah.
My name is, can you hear me?
Yes, I was just gonna say, introduce yourself and tell me where you're from.
Yeah, so I'm Kelly Acosta. I'm an assistant professor of special education here at Rhode.
Nice.
And I guess a question for you would be is, as I'm teaching my pre-service teachers about post-secondary transition, what would be like the one main important message I should share with those students?
Ooh. That's a really good question. I would say get out in the community, right? Like something that my special education professor did was she actually assigned like a community project where we had to like go to an event and write about it. So anything that sort of gets them like thinking beyond textbook, I think will like the message there is almost like the experience matters, and they will learn so much more from actually interacting with different people with disabilities versus like just talking about them. And anything where they can relate personal experience or experience of like being out and going to an autism project event or going into a local school, those experiences are really crucial where they can be hands-on. So I think my big message overall is sort of meet everyone where they're at, ask questions, be curious within reason, and just be present with those people because they are around us. I think like at least 1 in 5 of us have a disability, and some of it is very hidden And just, again, I think we need to normalize it. Thank you. Great that you're here.
Yeah. So for the benefit of time, I think that we're gonna just close. That's a great question though. Transition is best done in the community. That is a great message. So I'm just gonna say a couple parting words, and Ryan, I'm gonna give it over to you for your last thoughts. So we're gonna get people going, okay? As you meet with your teams today, you put together your plans, just encourage you to be very intentional about this idea of student engagement. What does it mean? And where do you start with it? You're all going to be at different places with the idea. There's a lot of great resources out there around engaging students. I know that at some point the RTCs have had I'm Determined, Dr. John McNaught and I'm Determined, absolutely amazing. It's imdetermined.org. It's a Department of Education out of Virginia project. And free. The Zero Center out of the University of Oklahoma, ZARROW, has a choice maker lesson package on self-directed IEPs, which again is free. And then the NTACT website, or now it's NTACT-C. You got to create a login, but once you create the login, boy, they have evidence-based practices, and they have tools, and they have studies. And it's just a wealth of information for those of you that are just wanting to dig a little bit more into this. So, what do you got in terms of a parting shot? What do you want to leave everybody with?
There's so much. That's such a tough question. I think I want to start with just, think about like what your goal is for the day, and sort of think about like what those reasonable goals are, and just I totally encourage all of you to have conversations, talk to each other, especially from different districts. Like so many heads are better than one with these kinds of things. And transition is such an important process. I think I want to echo what Andrew said and just say that this is a big part of someone's journey now, and you hope to create the best outcomes for each and every student. So I truly encourage you to think about every student you serve and how what you're doing today helps people from across this spectrum of ages and stages of life.
Let's hear it for Ryan Lukowicz.
Thank you, everyone. Sean, thank you for moderating. Ryan, thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
And